Okay, hello, Heather.
Hi, Natalie. So nice to see you again.
I know, I love it. I love this idea. I have to share with our audience. This is our Jewish Women Entrepreneurs podcast, and I want to share with everyone how the idea to make this special episode with you really happened. Everyone knows that we're going to talk about the hashtag war between my unorthodox life and my orthodox life. That's what we're going to talk about. And we've been exchanging online, me on my social media and you on your social media on this subject differently. And then I just said, wait, the greatest idea would be to get Heather on this podcast and to just have a conversation around this show, My Unorthodox Life, and around, I think, what it has done to us, because we have very different backgrounds, if not to say really opposite journeys. And I thought that it would just be interesting for me to have this conversation with you and for our listeners to maybe have a sneak peek behind, like we say, a fly on the wall to listen to our conversation. So thank you so much for accepting this invitation.
Gladly. It took 2 seconds just to find on the keyboard how do I reply yes enthusiastically.
Exactly, you were amazing. So before we start, I do want to share with everyone who you are, because it's important for us to know, who do we interview, who do we have on this podcast of the Jewish Women Entrepreneurs. So actually, you are a media consultant today, and also because of your whole career on media production, you've been interviewing very well-known people, and you've actually published a book that I've read and I loved on all the very famous people that you've interviewed. And you also are the host. Yes, exactly. The book is right here on the shelf. And you're also a host of a podcast for Aish.com. And you're coaching today people to know how to interview and how to have their own podcast. So I'm so thrilled to have you because I'm a newbie in the podcast world. I've just started this past year to podcast. And I know every time you give me critiques or feedback on my podcast, I'm always very flattered because I know that you're a professional with that. So thank you for being with us. And I want to start talking about how this show that I've watched, and I'm sure that a lot of people have watched, but even if they haven't watched it, they've heard about everyone talking about Julia Hart, about My Unorthodox Life, about other people reacting with the hashtag My Orthodox Life. And very quickly, just to make sure if someone hasn't seen or heard, it's basically a show on a woman who left her Orthodox life. She was living in Muncie, had 4 kids, and basically left her world and started a new life. And the show is a reality show, the way we know, Netflix does around what does it mean to leave this world and to become someone new for her and for her kids. I know I've watched this as soon as I clicked on play. I couldn't stop watching, binge watch the whole thing. And I was a little bit, how do you say, like, I wasn't sure how I reacted to the show. On the one hand, there were a lot of things that resonated with me because, as we're going to talk about, I also went through a process like this. And on the other hand, there were so many things I didn't like about the way she did it and how she communicated about the Orthodox world. And so it was very conflicted within myself. And I would love to hear what was your first reaction. And this is my first question. Like we said, we'll have an exchange of questions, so then you'll get to ask me questions. But what did you feel and how it resonated for you?
Okay,
This whole
so
show.
right, and I think most people do use that definition that this is a reality show, and those who are television critics and writers would say, and people who are just viewers, they all say, well, I don't know if it's such a reality show, but the term that is used in the industry is it's an unscripted show. Um, so it's an unscripted show. Now, the network that I got my start in as I was graduating college, because I used to be an intern at MTV. MTV was the first network that hired me as I was graduating. So MTV started it all with unscripted shows. People know about the the real world, the real world. So I was at MTV when they were just starting it as a pilot, and we were all like, what, you're going to put a camera on and just watch people live? And MTV made magic out of all that, because MTV, if anything, knows all about editing and pacing, and making an unscripted show something so watchable that people can't help but stay glued to it and just wait for the next episode. So here we have an unscripted show that you don't have to stay tuned. You can binge watch it. But it reminds me very, very much about where I got my start at MTV. And that is that this particular show and other unscripted shows take a hint from the MTV playbook. And this is something I learned there. When I was at MTV, I was working on a weekly movie preview show. But right across the hall from my office were people who worked on Club MTV. Do you remember Club MTV? Club MTV was a daily dance show. So it's just they play dance music, and you watch very sexy young people dancing, and the cameras would zoom in on body parts and underclothes and this and that. So I bring up Club MTV because it was what MTV did best, is that I learned that when things were edited at MTV, it's always to maximize the watching appeal. So every time a show is edited, anytime, even a newscast, when there's an edited segment, it's such a short program, they go for the highest impact when they're editing something. So obviously, when you're shooting hours and hours of the life of Julia Hart or Big Brother or anything, those producers, and again, that's my world, would watch all these hours and then make a note of what is going to make the best impact and tell the best kind of story. And that's why nobody uses the term reality TV so much anymore, because it's the producers who are deciding what's the narrative. They're just picking pieces here and there to edit. So it's unscripted. So unscripted, okay, fair enough. So I think that what we are seeing when we watch clips or whole episodes of My Unorthodox Life, you are seeing something that decisions were made in order to make a big impact and get people talking about the show.
So let me ask you, is that a success with that, in that angle? Meaning, if we are talking about it and it did raise so much noise, and maybe Julia Hart herself was not really responsible for the parts that were edited. So from your professional expertise, do you consider that this unscripted show was or is a success?
Okay, so as far as the television business is concerned, yes, it's a rousing success as a business. It's making money, it's getting a lot of attention, and it's increasing Netflix's brand. It for sure has increased Julia Hart's brand, because nobody outside the fashion world knew who she was, except for people in Muncie. In the fashion world, pretty much no one knew who she was. So
Right.
in terms of dollars, and it's definitely a success in that way.
Do we say something like, when we say, bad publicity is always, good publicity, or bad PR is always, like, even at the risk of being very controversial and saying things that a lot of people are going to disagree with, at the end of the day, they were successful at making noise and PR,
Right. Yeah, no, the phrase I think you're going for is, there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Right, exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, so, I remember the weekend after the Super Bowl with Janet Jackson, when she and Justin Timberlake had their, what was it called? It was a wardrobe malfunction. Okay, so again, the pundits, the television experts, that's what I was listening for. So they said, this is great business, because before the Super Bowl, here was Janet Jackson, then 37 years old. Other younger musicians ladies had come onto the scene, and she was not as relevant as anymore. Comes the wardrobe malfunction, and people could not stop talking for months and months and months, even to this day, when people remember Janet Jackson when she decides to retire, or whatever happens this will always be something that stays on people's minds. So when you get something
Right.
that rubs people a certain way and gets a lot of attention, yeah, it's in that way. So as far as dollars and cents and further the brand, it's a success.
Wow. Thank you so much for this answer. And I think now, if we follow our instructions, our self imposed instructions, I should say, I would be happy to answer any questions you have for me, dear Heather.
Sure, sure. So one of them is just why you think that this show has set off so many people, set up off a lot of women, and it's not as though we're just shining a light on somebody, an average person. Why do you think this show has really ruffled feathers or been rousing applause from some people?
So I think it's a very good question, and when you were asking the question, I'm thinking about the show Unorthodox, which is another show that Netflix has published, and tells the life, and it's not unscripted and it's not reality, but tells the story of a woman also leaving the Orthodox world. And I don't remember that it has set off so many people as this one has. So the question becomes, is it because of the topic? Is it because of the personality of Julia Hart? Is it because those same women? So if we take your question, it's the ones that have been set off and the ones that have been, applauding and really praising the show. So the ones that have been set off and really upset, but I think there was really a lot of even aggressive responses. I think that it has been, for the most part, I haven't read all of them, but from what I've seen, is that I think it's because of the bad reputation that this show could give to the Orthodox community, and how people from the outside can, have preconceived or misconceptions of what is the Orthodox world. And there was almost like an urge to say, hey, it's not true what Julia Hart is saying. We're very happy in our Orthodox world. There's nothing wrong with us, and we don't know what she's talking about, and almost like justifying and defending their happiness and their community. On the other hand, I think that the people that did applaud, I think, and that was also my conflicting approach, is that this show, whether it's Julia Hart herself or the editors or whoever did it, this show is raising questions, is raising real problems that maybe didn't have to be put on the public, in front of the public eye, because I don't know how many people from the public eye can do anything about it. But I do think that it was raising serious issues, and that the people applauding are like, yes, this is being made public, and maybe if things don't move from the inside, it will move once it's made public. But I agree with you that there is some kind of disproportion between the show and the reaction. I think there was
Mhm.
something much more aggressive. I was surprised to see how aggressive and how people were trying to justify themselves and the community in very strong terms. That
Can you
that I
give
felt
me,
there was a disproportion.
Natalie, can you give me an example of that? Because the title of this podcast is hashtag My Unorthodox Life versus hashtag My Orthodox Life. So, Give me an example of the aggressive side of it.
Well, I did find, and again, I haven't read all of them, and I haven't made a study or research on everything that has been said. But the ones that I've read have been very much personally attacking Julia Hart as a person, and really like holding her responsible for what she was saying, even though we say don't shoot the messenger, even though some of the things she was saying everybody knows and everybody is aware of. It's just that there was something that I think was taken very very much to heart when she was talking about the community and making it public again, like in the eyes of the non-Jewish people, and showing this Orthodox community as those people don't think it is.
So give me an example. For what example of Orthodox lifestyle was she putting a spotlight on that caused as you see, an aggressive response, or um, I mean, you mentioned community. So what is it? What is it
Right. So
about?
for example, she talks a lot about how women are not free in this community. They're not free to make choices. They're not free to choose their career. They're not free to dress as they wish. They're not free to marry who they want, or they're not free even in their sexual life. So she talks a lot about that. And a lot of women, again, I haven't done the research, but a lot of women that I've read were responding, it's not true. We are free. We love the way we dress, we love our career, we love, our life, and it's no one is forcing us to do it, and no one is putting like a gun to our head. And so this was this reaction of, it's not true what she's saying. It's just not true. So on the one hand, those women who responded, they're 100% right, because like I said in one of my posts, I've been an Orthodox woman, and I never felt that I was forced to do anything. I loved, dressing as an Orthodox woman. I loved my way of life. I loved the choices that I'd made, and so everything was done in 100% consent. No one was forcing me. However, having said that, that's where the conflict can be. However, having said that, when a woman comes out of the mainstream and decides to do something that might not be accepted socially, then there is a big reactions to, whether she's deciding to have a career and, not be with her kids, or whether she's deciding to wear something that is slightly provocative, or the long wigs, or the high heels, or we know about all those things where, fingers are pointed, people are talking. And so yes and no. Again, like, yes, women are free. No one is forcing them. But there
Right,
is a lot of social pressure. There is a lot of, things that are happening within the community.
right. So I think that when there is a lifestyle that's criticized, I think that people understand in a free society where you are allowed to express your opinion freely, this is just par for the course in a free society. And not everyone's going to agree, but you're free to agree, disagree, and whatever it is. What is not acceptable in a free society, and why sometimes people take one another to court, is if something is libelous or slanderous. Now, I'm not saying that Julia Hart has said anything libelous or slanderous, but I'm saying that is where a person uh, gets into a territory that's legally problematic. What Julia Hart, some of what she said that I think may cause very strong reactions is if something is completely out and out false. So, she made a comment about burning clothes in acid, that her mother would talk about how I mean, people who are familiar with that clip or that episode, they know about this threat about burning clothes in acid, and you can check out every source possible and do searches, and this is not part of the Jewish tradition. So when somebody who has this kind of international platform is talking about this as though it's a matter of Jewish life, burning clothes in acid, so you can understand how that could be a problem, and so many other things that she's saying and perpetuating. So I'm not talking about lifestyle choices, but when she's saying certain things about Judaism from having been inside an Orthodox lifestyle, inside a Jewish community of that nature, if she says things that are out and out not right, she talks about hell, right? And in Judaism, again, there are so many sources to this, but there is no such thing. Other religions do have eternal hell, eternal hellfire, and what that entails. And you and I both know there is a term called Gehenna, but we also know that's a 11-month process of cleansing, and it's only for the soul's benefit in order to be close to God. So that you and I know because we've learned this through Jewish scholars and scholars of the Talmud. But again, when someone has an international platform on Netflix and they're talking about eternal hell, that's wrong. And again, that's one of many reasons why people may say this goes beyond just criticizing.
Right. I totally understand. And what is coming up, from what you're saying now, is that I think there is also the question of the angle. Like, is this a personal story that someone is sharing and saying, my mother said this, or, I was told that hell, eternal hell, or whatever the example is, which is my personal story, and I'm sharing it, and no one can say, no, you haven't lived it, because that's her story, and no one can take
Right,
away
right, right,
her personal experience. And then there is the projection and the information, or the potential information that it's bringing on a world that is, to say the truth, is not very often described. I mean, now it seems to be a trend that, every show on Netflix is talking about Orthodox life, but up until a certain time, it wasn't a world that people really had access to. I mean, it was a closed world where people
right.
didn't really know
Yes,
how it was really, lived or experienced from the inside. So I think when I say that I was conflicted when I watched the show, or even after when I read the comments, it was that I took, and maybe I'm being naive, and I could be accused of that, but I was really taking Julia Hart's story as her personal story. And whatever she was talking about, whether it's true or not, the effect that it had on her is real.
yes,
Meaning,
yes,
whether the information is true, which I agree that, if it's not true, then, there's nothing to talk about. But when it's true, and she felt either hurt or scared or traumatized, or not aligned with what she wanted to live, that's her personal story, and
yeah,
no one can come and say, no, that's not true, you didn't go through that. That's an emotion. That's something that, so I think we're going back to
right,
the question, right? We're going back to the question of, are we talking about people in the Orthodox community, or the system? Right? Are we talking
right,
about individual lives, or people that are actually going through a journey in this, community, and everyone is going to have different experience, because that's how
right,
life is, right? Or are we talking about, like you said, is this a truth in the community? Is it a system?
right,
Is it
right,
recognized? Is it
right.
validated? Are, authorities, actually, accepting this about? So that's where I think the debate, I don't know what you think about that. I would love to
Yeah,
hear that, but I
yeah,
think that's
yeah.
where the maybe misunderstanding is.
Right, right. There are some examples in popular culture at large when this is done, when it seems like someone had an escape from something, a system that was awful, then they might become well known on the world stage, and then all the feathers are ruffled. So even outside the Orthodox Jewish system and philosophy, so back in the 80s and 90s, there was, I'm going to get her name wrong, Ayana Hersey. She was raised in a Muslim society. She does not speak for all Muslims, but she talks about things that she, in her own journey, found very problematic. I am not a scholar of Islam at all, but when she started talking about things, again, this is not my experience, but when she started talking about the idea of female genital mutilation, and everyone in the 1990s was horrified, and even to this day, that this could go on, and this is not part of Islam. We all know that, but this was part of her community, and it was her story. Going over to a different religious faith, when the actress Leah Remini left a long-time relationship she had with Scientology. So whereas with the case of Vienna Hersey, I'm sorry I'm not getting her name right, but there was probably a fatwa put on her head, and she certainly can't go back and live in a Muslim country and integrate herself back into the community. But with Leah Remini, who was a Scientologist for a very long time, her whole family, and then she made a choice to leave. Unlike Muncie, where there's no borders and fences and electric rails or there's no guards and gatekeepers, Leah Remini did have to actually escape from that. And she had the Scientologist equivalent of a fatwa on her head, so to speak. I'm not saying about her life being threatened, because that's nobody, to my knowledge, has talked about, but her career and just her family relationships, that, unlike a religion, is that really could qualify a little bit more cultish, perhaps. Again, I'm not anything. I have nothing to do with Scientology, so I can't make that. But I'm just talking about the idea of escaping from a community and a philosophy and striking out and being yourself, so to speak. So
Right.
there are going to be repercussions, and if she is misrepresenting what Scientology is, so Scientologists can, have every right, I guess, to say you're misrepresenting what it is. But she is going and went on a major media tour talking about, you won't believe what is going on in Scientology and what it is. And this ruffled a lot of feathers. The thing is with a lot of what Julia Hart is talking about, is lahavdil as far as Orthodox Jewish life. So again, there are so many falsehoods and misrepresentations, and this is what gets people very upset. The things that are part of her own journey, as far as how she felt about career, about parenting, about marriage, about standards of apparel, fashion. So these are things she feels very strongly about. You don't see anyone putting a fatwa on her head, and you don't see any gatekeepers going after her and threatening her security, to my knowledge. That would be wrong, and that would be very un-Jewish for such a thing to happen. So she is free to speak however she wants, and to live however she wants, and to engage in whatever career and relationship. She's free to do that. It's it's a bit of a shame for those moments where she's completely misrepresenting what Torah Judaism is about. And I understand that people can be upset if she's misrepresenting what a Torah lifestyle is about. So,
Right.
I am the opposite of Julia Hart, because I was in that world. I have covered, as a journalist, Fashion Week in America for E! Entertainment Television, and I've interviewed so many supermodels and so many fashion bigwigs and designers. But in the television world, I was sort of like not Julia Hart, but I was in that world of a very glamorous lifestyle. And also, if you read my book, you know that I'm the daughter of a professor, and I come from an academic background. So my decision to become a religious person whose values and religious observance is centered around the Torah, that's not coming from a dummy. Like, this is the things it didn't happen quickly, but it happened with a lot of thought and intelligence, a lot of emotion, and a lot of connecting to Israel. It happened, and I think it would be a real travesty if I misrepresented what my old lifestyle was about. If I speak, plainly and intelligently, and just state the facts, this is what my own journey, as you're talking about. So it's sort of like, how far do we reach to convey a message and an agenda? Clearly, she
Right.
has an agenda. So does Netflix.
Oh, definitely. I'm not doubting that. But I actually, when you were talking, I was thinking about, and that's what I think when I was reading those hashtags, My Orthodox Life. I felt like, of course, if you feel like there's misrepresentation, if there was, things there were things that were said about this community that are not true, yes, definitely, to point that out. But I did feel that it was also maybe an opportunity that we might miss, to really pinpoint the things that are not working in this community, because every community has, their aspects that are less working than others, and we can pretend to have like a perfect, it's not my perfect life, the hashtag. It's not, it's not that. So yes, I understand the fact that it was put on the public life, and that I think is really could really be, just really can hurt the community, and people, might react. But on the other hand, I heard other voices that said, you know what, maybe she did it the wrong way, but she is pointing out things that we need to be aware of, or that we need to be more, speak about more. And I think that would be a smart way to react and to say, you know what, yes, you've said this and this and this and this wrong, and this and this and this is not true, because it doesn't work like that. And so yes, we're happy, we're free, we live a beautiful life. And like I said, I was Orthodox in another life, so I definitely really relate to that. But I also went through things that are pinpointing on things that are not working in the Orthodox community. And you spoke about the Jewish way of doing things. I think that's the Jewish way of doing things, is to say, you know what, we're great, we're doing a lot of good, but maybe there are things that we can also learn from this. And how do we really do our own, cheshbon nefesh, right? How do we look inside ourselves and say, yes, this and this and this is working, but there are still things that are not working for the majority. So maybe some people are not touched by this, but there are things in the majority of people that that can feel things that she was pointing out. So I think this was one of the things that I wanted to respond. And the other thing that I feel is beautiful, which is what I wanted us to talk about also, is that you went through an Orthodox life, and you chose your Orthodox life. I went through an Orthodox life, and I chose my Unorthodox life. But I think what's beautiful is that today, you and I, we can say that we live aligned lives. Like, we're really 100% aligned with who we are, with our values, with the way that, our relationship to our spirituality, our relationship to our career, to our family. And I think that this is what is missing in the debate. What's missing, it's the middle ground. It's, stop talking about, are you Orthodox or not Orthodox? It's not what you are, it's how you live it. It's how you go through life. It's how you are actually, whether it's in any system, because everyone is in a system. Let's not fool ourselves. It's not because you're not Orthodox that you're not in a system. You can be in a secular system as well. But going for this alignment, that everyone has the right to choose, that, I feel aligned being an Orthodox. I feel aligned not being Orthodox. It doesn't matter where I belong. It's how I feel between me and myself that tells me if I'm, if I'm in my right path.
Yes. You and you know what I say to you, Kol HaKavod, I give you a lot of honor that you nonetheless identify at some sacrifice. You identify very strongly as Jewish, as a Jewish woman, and that this podcast, Jewish Women Entrepreneurs, and people behind the scenes don't know, Natalie, how you have sacrificed in upholding a Jewish identity. When you organized your first global online summit, right? So there are certain social media platforms, which I'm not going to name, that's up to you, but that we're not thrilled that you had niched into at the start, that it would be for Jewish women entrepreneurs. So yes, a person who is by Jewish law Jewish is as Jewish as one another. It doesn't take away from who we are according to Jewish law. So it is very important to be aligned. If I could address something you said about systems and calling out a system. So I think that's one of the things that we like so much about each other, that we embrace the lifestyle that we have chosen, whatever level of religious observance that is. But we're also past the age of 20, 25, and we have seen how so many lifestyle choices and industries, none of them are perfect. And it is important to within whatever the industry or whatever the lifestyle, it is important to have those conversations. So, my dad of blessed memory, so he was a college professor. He was actually chairman of a department at the university where he taught. The university system is not perfect. His field, industrial engineering, not perfect. Anyone who's a medical doctor, that is the hospital systems, not perfect. Medical insurance, it can be a mess, especially outside of Israel. It's more of a mess. I thank God that I live in a country with socialized medicine. Parenting, that's a lifestyle choice for most of the population to be parents. It's also never a perfect life when you take on being a parent. So no system is perfect. No city where you decide to live is perfect. So you may as well live in Israel if you're doing. And I really feel that. So any of our choices, they're really not perfect, and it would be a nice thing not to attack one another as a person because of a choice. Shedding light and having those conversations. Yeah, let's be civilized and let's have those discussions and see what good can come from it.
Right. I definitely agree. And the more I hear you talk, and the more I think that if there is something that we could wish that, going back to the show and going back to Julia Hart, I think that what was missing was, the gratitude that she could have felt for this world, or also showing the good part of it, a more balanced, approach, and showing how, yes, there are things that are not working, but there are also things that are working. And it's not for no reasons that you have, again, I don't have the numbers if it's thousands or millions of people that are at least hundreds of thousands of people that are in this lifestyle. And like you said, there's no gatekeepers or no wires, no one is stopping them or forcing them. And so yes, I do think that maybe what made, and I'm understanding this now from our conversation, what made me feel uncomfortable from watching the show is that even if I could understand where she was coming from, and I could also feel the pain, I do have to say that I identified with, when you're a strong woman, and you feel, and you can appear as being so self-confident, and not having the need to be accepted or loved. And I do feel like sometimes things are painful. And when you're a strong woman, you don't really know how to say it in a non-aggressive way. So I did identify with, she's being successful and talking about things that were hurtful, but could be misunderstood with being aggressive or criticizing, whereas she could just have said, it was difficult for me. You don't have to criticize the whole community. You don't have to, describe or put yourself as a judge. You could just say, this was my experience, even though there are so many other women that don't go through this experience. And I think that's the choice that I've made. I mean, that I'm writing a book, and whenever I talk, I always say this has been my personal journey, and there were some people on the way that that I've met, or circumstances, but I cannot make a whole judgment of a whole community or criticize, or no, it's not my place. I can just talk about my own journey. So the more we're having this conversation, the more I'm hearing that this is probably what has set off a lot of people, that she put herself as a judge and not coming from, this was my personal journey. There were good things. There are things that need to be corrected. And I'm here to point them out for the good of the community or for the good of the world, not just to criticize. Right? Maybe that's an answer to your first question.
Yes. So listen, as the interviewer in me always has the audience in mind. So I can't read if there's a chat going on this live podcast. Certainly there will be comments when people watch it on the replay. And I encourage people to write in the comment section the word replay or hashtag replay, whatever it is, so that Natalie will know that you eventually did see it. So I'm having the audience in mind, and the audience is clamoring to know, name one example, Natalie, that you felt needed, that maybe this show is a catalyst or just needs to be addressed.
What do you mean that the show was a catalyst?
From your experiences in Orthodox Unorthodox, formerly Orthodox Jew, and Julie Hart. So something about her life as a formerly Orthodox Jew. Like I'm sure there are people in the audience wondering, well, what needs to change? Or they're thinking, Natalie, say this thing needs to change.
Wait, you mean like what? How is the show
Yeah,
showing some one thing that needs to change?
right. So
Right. So
let's get.
I'll tell you because I do think that this is something that needs to change in general, maybe in every system. But I'll talk about the ones that I know. Is we see a lot of how in the show how she talks to her children, and she's trying to teach them and show them, and it's educate them. It's a very important value that she has, which is probably one that she got also from the Orthodox Jewish life, because it's a very predominant value in this world as well. So she probably kept it from there, and we see how she's trying to really show them that everything is possible, that they have their own choices. And I think that one of the things that I would say is that when you make that choice of being an Orthodox Jew, you make it for yourself. You, of course, would love for your children to follow and to be in that world as well. But sometimes I find that, it's at the expense of maybe the alignment of that child, and that this child has to be within that world, or play the rules, or play the social game, because we don't want people to talk, or because we don't want people to see. And I feel like this is a big sacrifice that a parent can ask a child to do. So one thing that I would say this show is showing and could be teaching something is, of course, as parents, we always want the best for our children. And of course we can say, I think this is the best life that you can live, and I think the best way to do this is to show by example. But if there is a child that is not aligned with an Orthodox way of life, because there needs to be also some kind of mental structure and some kind of, alignment with the values, alignment with, the whole system. So maybe there should be room for saying, maybe it's okay. You can be religious a different way, or you can choose a different path. You don't have to follow this path because this is the one I've chosen. So this is one of the things, but I know that it's difficult to actually, implement, because that's how maybe people are going to think the system is going to disappear if you don't keep the children, your children in the system. But that's what one thing I would say, that
Right, right,
alignment before like telling someone telling you what to do, or someone
right, right, right. So I think that
having the truth.
I think people who heard your answer heard for just a minute there that there was this piece of what will the neighbors say. You didn't say it that way, but it's just
Yes.
that the idea of
Yes.
what will people think if
Social pressure.
my child. Right, right. So I think that's an important thing that a lot of parents have to face, and it's something that is not just exclusive to a Torah-centered lifestyle. Is that parents, being human beings, do sometimes think, if they are challenged that way, maybe there is that moment of what will the neighbors say. This also happens in marriage. If the spouse tells, or the partner tells, an off-color joke, like that was so not PC, that was so wrong, what will these people at this party think? Everyone's kind of concerned about what will people think. I also would like to address, though, that it could also be that those parents may not be so concerned about the social pressure as they are concerned about that particular child. That maybe what that child is wanting to do or tempted to do, it may not just be because, oh, they should fall in line with our religion and get their act together. It could be just because, well, if our child is wanting to maybe test the water in that other way, maybe it's just not good for the child to make certain choices that are really not good for them, religious or not. So I mean, I know that there are families that maybe they follow a certain Jewish path, that the whole family is Litvish, from a Litvish background, which is a certain part of Europe where it was a Litvish from Lithuania, but there were shtetls, there were communities where this was the custom. And it sometimes happens that a child, or more than one child in that family, wants to become a chassid, which is, Hasidus is a different kind of Judaism. And, oh, well, will the neighbors think the shame that, it's like, and it happens all kinds of ways. Like, oh, my child's going to wear this kippah, or the child's going to live on a hilltop, and who knows. So it could be like, if someone is in a family system where the parents really are, their value system are authentic Jewish values, they may, hopefully in a healthy way, they might be just concerned, is this really good for my child? As opposed to socially, what will the neighbors say? Or I'll never be able to face my family if my child goes and lives on a hilltop. Like, chaval, at least your child is keeping Shabbat.
Right.
If that's an important.
But I do think that beyond what the neighbors say, there's also an absolute truth. That a lot of people, hold as a, as a truth, that this is the absolute truth, that there are no other truth. And by the way, I do want to address that, this is the Jewish Woman Entrepreneurs Podcast. We're not really talking about business, but I do want to talk about the Jewish woman dimension, because I do think that any change that we're talking about, or evolution, or things that might improve any system, I do think that it will come from the women. Just because we can have those conversations, just because we can talk about it, we can agree to disagree, because we can look at it without taking it from a place of ego, or from a place of, we have done this for thousands of years and this is how it needs to stay, and this is one of my mission with this podcast, because it's really about having those conversations. I'm sure we won't have all the solutions, and I'm sure it's not going to change tomorrow. And it's okay, like you said, nothing is perfect, but continuing to have those conversations, and to be able to look at ourselves, and to be able to, yes, take, the critique or the feedback when it's applicable, or looking for this alignment, no matter which system you're in. I believe that this is the way, the feminine way, whether you're a woman or man. But I think that this is the feminine way, and that's why I'm passionate about this. It's really bringing the more feminine aligned, in organic continuation of who we are. That's what you make me. That's how it resonates when you talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we do get back to the show's main character, Julia Hart, or the star of the show, she's not a character, she's a real person. So, one of the things I was asking you when we were preparing to meet up today was just your opinion on Julia Hart's own alignment. We don't know her personally. She's not part of my social circle. However, she has, because she's chosen a certain lifestyle, and she's always had a thing for fashion, and she's always had these struggles about running her own business. So, would you say that Julia Hart is has aligned her? Does she have a purpose-driven business that's aligned with her goals?
That's a very good question. Again, I don't know her personally. I do think that the success that she has reached is because this was her passion. I do think that it's very much connected, that because she was, or is, or certainly is, passionate about fashion, and she has a mission, whether we like it or not. She does have a mission, and she has some values that she's defending. And that is the definition of a purpose-driven business. Whether we agree with the mission or not is another question. But I definitely think that this is part of why she's attracting people, and not only around the Netflix show, but even when we see her being successful and being able to be herself, totally herself, in her professional world. Is she herself and totally aligned in her personal world? It's more difficult for me to say.
Right.
For me to say.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
because
What if,
because because the whole show was about again, we don't know what was made for the show and what she really feels and how she's really going through this. So,
right,
but in
right.
terms of the business aspect, I definitely think that her success is due to the fact that she made the decision to really follow her passion and to really be herself and really find her path in this world of fashion. That is definitely for me really true.
So I had a very interesting hour to 2 hours last week because having come from the television background, television and movies, nothing gets done until an executive producer green lights it. And that's to say, an executive producer is the top of the production in their department, and they are also the money people. So they are just looking at dollars and cents. So I am wondering, there's obviously some executive producer over at Netflix that greenlighted this show. What I spent over an hour, almost 2 hours researching and could not find the answer was who approached whom? Did Netflix
Mm,
approach Julia Hart and say, "We are building a show around you, lady"? Or did Julia
mm-hmm,
Hart and her people approach Netflix? It has to happen
mm-hmm,
one way or the other.
right,
Usually, when you get a big network like Netflix, everybody who wants some sort of attention or who wants to grow their brand, they would love to partner with Netflix. So
right.
I don't know. I don't know if who reached out to whom, but both have benefited from this alliance. But knowing what I know about how television works, I think that it's Julia Hart who reached out to Netflix. And again, it's a business decision, which means she also has people on her team with media connections. And I am guessing, and I think it's a very strong, educated guess, that it's her team reached out to Netflix. And, Netflix probably, knowing that she wasn't yet a household name, would want to also know numbers. What's your social media following like? How many followers do you have? And if we're going to help catapult your brand, what are you going to do? How's it going to benefit us? Because we get pitched all the time for shows. So
Right.
somehow it was convinced, the top brass at Netflix were convinced, this is one show we are green lighting. Maybe it's because they did have such big success with Unorthodox. So this seems to be a path Netflix is very comfortable going down. I'm not comfortable with that kind of a path. I don't think it's good at all for a very strong and influential media company to perpetuate programming that misrepresents Orthodox Judaism, that misrepresents Torah Judaism, that misrepresents the Torah. I don't think that's good at all, and I don't mind telling anybody that. I don't think that's good at all, but that is a business
But are
decision.
you surprised? But are you surprised? I'm not surprised.
No,
I
I'm not
mean,
surprised because of the success of Unorthodox, because of the show that.
no,
Um,
I just
yeah.
think that the agenda, you said before that Netflix has an agenda. I don't think that Netflix
Oh, their
agenda
agenda is
is
to
to
make money.
show.
No, no, no. Their
Exactly.
agenda is to make money.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So
I,
I'm not
I,
surprised that,
yeah.
yeah, I think it just makes sense. It just totally makes sense.
MTV as a network where I worked was also it's a business. They also wanted.
It
That's why you,
is.
you had things like Club MTV, and they took a chance with Yo MTV Raps because MTV sorely lacked any programming for an urban market done by Black people. But wow, did they find success with Yo MTV Raps? And every network I've ever worked for, it is a business. It's a business
Yeah.
decision, but I'm also
Yeah.
allowed to say, look, as someone who's a media consultant and media presence, I don't like one bit that it's perpetuating certain untruths out there. Even
Yeah.
though yes, every system has its flaws. Um, but I don't think the creator has flaws. And I want to make a prediction
No.
because I see we have around 6 minutes left. But I want to make a
Yes.
prediction that it's not going to happen in the next week. But I think that Julia Hart will have an awakening. She's already had many awakenings. I do think that she will be someone who eventually will come back to
Oh,
Torah
wow.
observance. I really think
Wow.
eventually, and again, I don't think it's going to be next week. I think she
Yes.
will, and I think that the impact that she has and the wide reach that she has, it may actually do a lot of good in the world as far as hopefully making a Kiddush Hashem in the world. But yeah, she, one way or another, I really do think that she will
Interesting. I
embrace.
don't know. I don't know about that. But to
No
finish on a
problem.
positive note,
Yeah, yeah,
I will say that I think that if a few women, doesn't have to be hundreds, but a few women decide to look for their alignment, and it doesn't matter what shape or form. It doesn't matter, if it's professional or with their kids or with what they love to do, and if they stop themselves from asking questions and they start asking questions just by watching this show, um, I think that this would have been, I think already a big step, even though I agree with you that the motivation and the agenda is totally for money, just for money purposes, definitely. And I don't think, I mean, you're making a prediction and I'm making an assumption that I don't think that the agenda, Julia Hart's agenda, was to speak bad about the Orthodox
right,
community.
right.
I think it was a consequence, and I think it did happen because of her show, but I don't think it was a conscious decision or something that she wanted to happen. Maybe she wasn't careful enough for it not to happen, or maybe she did make some general observations or make believe that things were true. So yes, but I don't think that was her agenda, or I think that that's not her motive. And again, I do think that if some women can see that and say, hey, maybe I'm going to look into how I can look prettier, or how I can be more aligned with my career choice, or how I can be happier in my life. It doesn't have to be that you have to change your lifestyle. You can just, wherever you are, decide to be more aligned. It's not a matter of appearance or system. It's an internal question that you ask
Internal, right,
yourself.
right, right.
Exactly.
Yes, a look
Exactly.
inside. Yes, absolutely,
That
absolutely.
will already be a great goal, and that's the goal of the Jewish Women Entrepreneurs podcast. It's to
Right.
wherever you are, whether you're Orthodox or not Orthodox, or Jewish or not Jewish, or woman or not woman, it doesn't matter. It's just like asking the right questions, looking inside, seeing how aligned you are with your life choices, and having the courage to make those choices. Because as long as you're, not aligned, everyone's going to suffer around you, and yourself first. So
Oh,
it's
so
just a it's
beautifully
just
put.
a
Yeah,
it's just a message, and I'm so happy that we can have that conversation from one aligned person to another. I think that this is the great example that we can give to people and to our kids. That
yes,
I think is our responsibility, definitely. So
yes.
thank you so much, Heather, for joining me.
Thank you, Natalie. Always wonderful to speak with you and share ideas.
Amazing. Yes, fascinating. I'm sure that we'll hear the feedback, and everyone who has questions will be able to reach out to us, and we're happy to continue that conversation offline. So thank you for being in this Jewish Women Entrepreneurs podcast, and
Thank
I
you.
can't wait for our next interviews and podcasts and episodes and all good stuff. Great.
Yes, yes, all good things.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you.